I know you are a busy executive function coach, and so I'm so glad you could take some time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So we are gathered here for this particular video because I think you have something really important to tell the world, which is coming shortly. But before we get to that, can you say just a little bit about the company you started and why you found it so useful to be also an anti-boring licensed coach inside my educators community?
Absolutely. So my business is almost 8 years old, which is exciting. And one of the reasons I started my business was actually because I was working for a research study and I was seeing a lot of students who were having difficulties with executive functions, but didn't have a diagnosis. And I wanted to make sure that there was a resource out there for kids who were struggling that were not getting that diagnosis. So parents weren't necessarily having that label in order to make sure that they, were getting help. Um, because I don't come from an education background, I took your course, or I took your free course to begin with, the free night, and it just really blew me away. One, because you present things in such a fun way that I think it's awesome for kids, because I think kids need that. But the other part was, I knew that that was a missing piece in my practice, was making sure that kids had study skills, because they're not being taught study skills. And so I wanted to make sure that, I had that skill to pass on, but also, as I've hired more coaches, that is a required training that each of my coaches have, because I think it's so important.
I just love
Yeah.
it. We have a new person who's a recent college graduate coming through the
Yeah.
Art of Inspiring Students, who's a new coach for you.
Very exciting. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, and your training, you had previous work in the world of learning differences and executive functioning, and then you went through ADHD coach training, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I've worked with students with disabilities for over 25 years, and in
Yeah.
a different ways. I have a master's in psychology, so
Mhm.
my background is mostly in the brain side,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's kind of what led me here.
Yeah. So you have spent a lot of time inside our community collaborating with and supporting other coaches who either have been trained or are currently being trained. And you have your own groups inside the ADHD coaching world that you participate in, all as an attempt to build your own skills and create community to support this growing coaching business that you have. And in the midst of all of that, you have seen another missing skill set. So study skills was the first one that you noticed missing, and you came to me for that. Yay. And so can you tell us about this other missing piece that you are increasingly passionate about?
Yeah, so that missing piece is executive function. I don't think that people have a really good understanding of what executive function is. And there's a lot of coaches. I might have a visitor who's coming on my lap soon, um, but
Hello, Kitty.
but I saw that people have a lot of great coaching skills, but if you don't have an understanding of executive function, and you don't understand how these different executive functions are impacting the students that we're working in, that could be a huge problem, that we're kind of doing a disservice to some of our students rather than a service to them. So that's when I was like, wait, I have to kind of figure this out, because whereas different groups touch on executive function, nobody is really taking this deep dive into it, and not only having the brain science behind it and the research behind it, but also having accommodations and techniques and different things that as a coach you can apply. So
Well, and that's where I think you and I dovetail so much, is that this idea that it's not just the strategies, not just the specific strategies that we need, not just the brain science that we need, but we need both together. Students need that, and we educators need that, and parents need that as well. So tell us what you have done to fill that whole. I'm so excited about this.
Yeah, and I am too. I really, the more and more it's developed and evolving, the more and more I get excited because I just want to make sure that people can walk away and be able to give great coaching services or teaching services or parenting to the kids that are in their lives. So I've created this course on executive function. That's going to be the first course that I actually create. Believe it or not, there's other ones that are down the road. But this one is all focused on executive function. And then what I do is talk about some of the main executive functions. Not a lot of people understand that executive functions is actually an umbrella term, which means that it is many different things. It's not just a group of set of things, which often I think a lot of people kind of advertise them as. So yeah. So I've created a module just about executive function, the brain science, diving into some of the research. Now, people might think, why do I need research? Well, research is imperative in my opinion, because we need to know what has been found out about the brain in order to really be a good coach, because these executive functions really do involve a lot of brain stuff. I cannot tell you how often a parent will call me and say, I have a really smart kid. And I'm like, that's awesome. But what are their executive functions like? Because that is what's impacting their learning, their education. So besides the executive function module, I will have several of them. And some of the main ones that I think are really important right now are metacognition, it's working memory, flexibility. And then I'll have some of the more common ones that people talk about a lot, which is time management and organization. Just as important, don't get me wrong, but really just diving into it and giving a variety of different things. I think another thing is, as coaches that work with students, we don't just address school things. I mean, often some of our families come to us and they're like, I just need to get them out of the house in the morning. How do I get them to get out of the house? And so we don't always just talk about school things. We need to talk about home things as well, because we wear many hats as coaches, many, many hats.
Well, and there's something very specific that I love about this course you're creating and the way you're structuring it. Because I know there are other courses on executive function out there, but I think there's something very special about yours that I'm going to point to in a moment. But before I point to that, I want to name that I am so excited about this, partially because I am one of those people. Like, my expertise truly is specifically learning, specifically study skills. I am not somebody who has a ton of training. I've read enough to support my clients very well, but I have those holes you're talking about. And for that reason, I have not included a lot of training in executive function in my anti-boring approach trainings for educators. But this is about to change because you have created this series, or you are creating, I know it's not quite ready yet, this series that I just think is going to be such a perfect add-on to my Rock Your Coaching and Rock Your Biz trainings. And I love that I'm at a stage in my own career where I don't need the ego of being the expert on everything, and I can collaborate with some of the best folks out there. And you have always been our go-to whenever there's a sticky question related to very specific brain functions related to executive function. And now we get to give your info to the folks who join my programs.
Yeah, I want to, I think that's really great to have, there are academic coaches out there that are going through your program, but also are going to have this additional information. And every month they're kind of getting a taste of a different executive function. But I think the other thing is realizing you might not be an expert in this area and you might only touch it, but it has its handprints all over your program. And so each video I try to relate what that executive function, how that's impacting the study cycle, and which tools are utilizing executive functions.
Yes. And so what Krista is talking about right now is, while she's creating her full course, which is going to be over 40 hours and a really, like Krista said, deep dive into the nuts and bolts of executive function and how to support students, uh, she is creating, and I'm so grateful for this, one video a month inside our Anti-Boring Educators Club, where she gives us an overview of that particular executive function. So I think we have the time management and organization ones in there right now. I think we have working memory in there right now. And so then the first half, you give us your intro, your overview to that executive function. And then in the second part, you address specific anti-boring tools and how those tools are useful for that particular executive function. And I'm so thrilled about that. I'm learning, people in our club are learning right now. I'm actually about to send an email out every few months. I say, hey, everyone, do your homework, watch Krista's EF deep dive videos so that we can discuss it at the next Rock Your Coaching call. And so that's coming up soon. But it's such a value add to the community. And I know that the folks who make it through my entire training are going to be better coaches as a result of what you're creating.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Just having that level of understanding is just fabulous for our students, because let's be real, we have students that are coming to us usually because they do have something like ADHD or even executive function challenges. Another thing people don't realize is you don't have to have a diagnosis to have executive function challenges. And so we are sometimes getting these students that are kind of just lost. And so understanding those executive functions and then understanding which tools, utilizes those, is really important.
I'm actually thinking, as you just mentioned that, about this one client that I have been really trying to help him solve what's going on for him. And we actually did get him tested. I just talked to the testing person and I was like, I hope that he has some diagnosable condition. And guess what?
Nothing? Wow.
Nothing.
Wow.
According to the testing, his EF is high. However, there is some depression and or anxiety that didn't come through necessarily on the kinds of tests she gave, but in her conversations, her interviews with over 30 people or 15 people, I should say,
Right.
that through line became clear. And we know that executive functions are very impacted, like follow through
Absolutely
is impacted by the mental health deals. So
yeah.
that goes to what you were saying. It's very useful still to understand what can be going on with executive functions, and then to help the kid understand the science behind why they might be struggling.
Yeah. Right. Having students understand what's happening in their brain. It's not that they're lazy. It's not that they don't care. What is happening in their brain? Why is this happening? And, to kind of really reinforce that fact that, there can be nothing going on. One of the most fascinating research articles I've read in the last couple of months has been on executive function challenges in individuals that have COVID. And, we're seeing that a lot. And I really think that that's one of the reasons why we are getting more college students than we've ever had. I think that's one of the reasons, either the impact of having COVID or just the impact of being in school with COVID or out of school with COVID. So yeah, absolutely.
And let's add to that then also the impact of the mental health deals,
Right.
even
right.
if you never actually got COVID, how that impacts your executive functions. And one of the problems lately is that people know the term executive function and so are using it constantly. It's become one of those buzzwords over the last 15 years where we're using it, but not necessarily understanding or having the depth of understanding that we need as professionals in order to make sure that we're adequately addressing.
Right. Absolutely. And understanding that, again, if we go back to your student, like I would love to see his testing, because what is his working memory like? If it's just his working memory that's being impacted. Now you said his executive functions were tested and they were fine, but is it what's going on with processing speed, which is not an executive function, but also really impacts things.
Yeah.
So yes, as coaches, we really have to be aware. And the second course that I'm going to be building is actually on these comorbidities: depression, anxiety, dysgraphia, dyslexia, because again, as coaches, we have to understand these at some level to really offer our kids really good services.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes. So when do you think your first course on executive functions is going to be ready in its fullest state? Do you know yet?
So the first, it actually is published right
Oh,
now.
it is.
So people do have the opportunity to go into it. We will be changing it up a little bit over the summer, but metacognition, working memory, just executive function itself, and flexibility. That is all out there, so you can have the opportunity. And the Educators Club is getting a taste of things, but they're not getting the entire module. So yeah,
Well, and
so that
that's what I wanted you to talk about. So this is what I was alluding to before. What I'm so excited about your full course is it's not just intro to executive function. It really is a deep dive. And so will you walk us through for each executive function what the different modules are that that people learning will experience?
Yeah, so I pretty much have the same theme in each module. So each executive function has that. But what I'm doing is first, I have an activity. I want people to experience these executive functions. And I've done it in a variety of different ways. Some of them I'm using some modified testing things that have been done in testing. In other ways, I'm just doing some creative activities that really just kind of really show us what that executive function is.
And I want to pause you right there because empathy in adults' bodies for what's happening in student bodies and brains is so important. And I think largely missing. There's some sympathy, maybe, but true empathy. And it's something that again, where you and I are aligned, I force educators in my Art of Inspiring Students Club to do the note taking processes so that you can have empathy for how hard it is. And you force us to walk through these modules where we have an actual experience of what it might be like to have dysfunction with one of those skills.
Absolutely. I think that that's crucial for us to understand that and have that empathy, understanding and empathy. I mean, that's what you need as a coach is having that. So we have that. We always have an introduction, which is going to include some research. It's going to have some brain science. Some of the brain science doesn't go too deep because some of them, like organization and planning, there's not a lot of brain science attached to it. But things like metacognition and working memory, I mean, you have to understand that at a deep level. So we'll have that. We'll also have accommodations for both at home and at school, different techniques. And sometimes for some of the modules, if it really has an emotional impact, there'll also be a video that just talks about that emotional piece because some of our kids, again, get these labels, in the ADHD world, there is someone who has said that by age 12, the kids are getting like 25,000 more negative messages than their peers. And it's not that people are purposefully giving those negative messages, but, oh, you can do better. Or, if you put potential in, and this actually starts to really affect our students. So having that understanding and empathy, but also understanding that kids don't always emotionally react the same way as adults. And so even in something like depression, we're going to see a different presentation of that. And so again, understanding that. So there'll also be a workbook. I'm a really big believer, like you, of having people take their own notes, have that level of understanding, and also they get to walk away with that. So that'll also be included.
And like I said, there are other courses on executive function out there. Was there something going on with the sound?
Yes, I did not hear you for a second or two.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's because there's a loud truck outside and I forgot to close the window before making this recording, but I think it has moved through. So I will start again. But what was I going to say? Do you remember what we had just said before?
Workbook. I talked about the workbook.
Oh, yes, there are lots of other courses out there that I've seen on executive function, but I think there is something very special about learning that has been designed by people who are also academic coaches and also have a deep knowledge base. I'm really seeing that, to toot my own horn, in the structure of my course. And I'm seeing that in the structure of your course too. We really understand the weeds and the details of learning and can then create learning experiences that help support that. Now, the downside of that is it will be a lot of work, right? This is not an intro that people can do in 5 to 10 hours, but it is something that if they devote themselves to the learning container that you are providing, they will have such a strong foundation at the end. And that foundation won't just be encoded, right? Because you understand the study cycle. It will have been retrieved and encoded in a new way, and it will be deeply lodged and fluent inside people's beings by the time they are done with your course.
Yes, I want you to walk away as a coach, again, a parent, teacher, anyone who's utilizing this information, and not only understand it, but I want you to have some tools and techniques that you actually can apply. When we look at things like working memory, even metacognition, like these impact things like reading comprehension, writing. In fact, I have been spending so much time on writing in each module that I'm actually going to do a recap on writing and executive function. I actually just bought a book on writing and executive function because it impacts writing so much. And so you're really going to walk away really, really hopefully understanding some students that you're working with, and then having some different unique tools. Also, I have this really great activity, and I use this with everyone I work with, whether it's a student or a parent, anyone. And it's a candy exercise. And I'm not going to give away everything, but one of the reasons I do it is all of our brains are unique. What works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. We do trial bases all the time as coaches. And so I want to make sure that you're walking away and having those tools to be able to trial different things with your students.
So there are two different ways that interested parties can access your course. One way is to go just directly through you. There will be links below on the YouTube video for how to access you, but why don't you just say out loud where people can go to find you?
Yeah, so you can definitely find us at www.connectedpathwayscoaching.com. So that's going to be one way. You'll also have a link that can take you right to the registration for the course.
Great. So that will be below.
Yes.
And if you are a coach who believes, oh, wow, I actually have these two deficits, the study skills deficit and the executive function deficit, and I'd love to spend a year getting both filled.
And to be honest, if you're working with a student, you are that coach. You do have a deficit in both of those areas.
Yeah. It's the harsh truth, but yeah.
Right?
Then joining my Rock Your Coaching program could be a really good direction for you. You would get access to the study skills piece. You'll get access to my habit and grades tracker mini course. You'd get access to the intro, those intro videos to each of the executive functions and how my anti-boring approach toolkit can be used for those. You'll get all of that. And you'll get access to Krista's course at a discount. So if you come into my community. So either way is a fine direction. And there will be links below about how to access my world. And in my world, you'll get to see Krista because she lives in my world. And in Krista's world, you'll get to see Krista.
You'll also play a big part in my world. You know that. I can't tell you how often I use your name. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, I just feel so grateful that we get to collaborate and we get to partner, and I get to learn from you as much as you have learned from me. So
it's been fabulous, definitely. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I've joined your clubs is, yes, I have an ADHD world that, I partake in, but I wanted to be part of a group that was diverse, that really were coming from different places. And your group is that group. So it's been fabulous too.
It's true, isn't it? I mean, we have occupational therapists who are also coaches. We have executive function coaches. We have ADHD coaches. We have academic coaches. We have teachers.
Sometimes just parents. Yeah. People are coming from all different places, and it's a great place to participate. I love case collaborations on Thursdays, and many of your activities. You're always doing tons of activities. So yeah.
So the last just quick and fun thing to mention, will you move your head just a little bit so we can see your beautiful flowers behind you? Because Krista makes those paper flowers, and I'm so jealous, and I want to learn how to make them too. You are one of many talents.
Have to have self-care, right? Self-care is essential. So yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, check out those links below, everybody. I hope we get to see you in one of our 2 worlds. And Krista, I will see you as soon as I hit stop on this recording.
Sounds great.